Okay, recently we released a video on LinkedIn and on YouTube about small talk and about how we use small talk in our professional conversations with people. And it sparked quite a lot of interest from people. Actually, we had a few DMs from people and a few messages on the post asking some questions about small talk. So we thought we would take a deeper dive in today's video around small talk. So, Graham, I'm going to hand over to you, but can we hear from you about why small talk is critical for conversations?
Yeah, thanks, Kathryn. So that video was really interesting because we got a lot of interest in it from people, and not everyone agreed with what I said, but quite a few people were asking questions about, okay, tell us more. So let's do a bit of that. So the video we did recently was about small talk and the purpose of small talk. And we spoke about how small talk helps conversations. So if I just recap a little bit, conversations are about two-way communication. So to make conversations work really well, what we want to do is kind of tailor our approach a bit to kind of sink in with the mood and the energy and the focus of the other person. And of course, the question is, well, how do you understand where the other person's at? And really, the fastest and best way to do that is through small talk. It's through that kind of inconsequential conversation that enables you to kind of just work out where the other person's at. So that
So,
was the
sorry, Graham. So you're saying then that small talk's a bit like a way of testing the water with people?
Yeah, it is. It is. It's a way of sort of dipping your toe in the water to find out kind of what's on the other person's mind, what's their energy levels like, how are they showing up to this conversation? Are they brimming with energy and ready to go? Are they a bit tired? Have they been a bit frustrated in the last conversation? Are they worried? Are they excited? So how do you find that out? It would be great, wouldn't it, for the more logically minded people if you could just ask the question. If we're having this conversation, Kathryn, I could say, oh, Kathryn, what's your mood today? And you could say, oh, I'm quite energetic, but I'm a little bit worried about my next meeting. I could tailor my conversation, but we're not going to do that. So the small talk, the banter we have when we talk about the weather and what we did at the weekend is a way of just gently sort of finding out a little bit more about where the other person's at. And we want to do that because more effective conversations create more value. Really, that's what it's all about, right? But one of the questions I was asked was, well, tell us more about the why, the specifically, why do we want to do this? And sort of how it works. So I've just been thinking about that. And there's a number of things we didn't talk about on that last video. And I'll just touch on some of those now. The last video we spoke about how we use small talk to understand more about the other person. But I guess the first thing to say is that works the other way around too. So that's reciprocal. When we engage in small talk ourselves, of course, the other person gets to kind of feel a bit more about us as well. Now, we and the people watching this video, we're kind of really interested in the art and science of conversation. So we'll be highly adept at this. Other people may not be quite as good as we are at tailoring our approach based on what they hear and what they see. But nonetheless, we share a bit about ourselves. The other person gets to get a sense of where we're at and how we're feeling and our energy and our mood and our focus. And they'll be able to tailor their approach a bit as well. It's kind of quite instinctive for a lot of people. And then there's this other aspect, which is when we have small talk, we're actually sharing something about ourselves. And this is really interesting, Kathryn. I know, the other day we were speaking and we had a bit of a small talk chat, and you said you'd spent, I think it was a Saturday morning, with your family watching football, watching your sons play football. And
Every weekend, Graham, rain or shine.
well, now that's really interesting, isn't it? Now imagine I didn't know you, but you just shared that with me. Instantly, I'm forming a bit of an image about you and your family setup and what's important to you and how you choose to spend your time and what you prioritize. And I might not be completely accurate in that image, but it's a pretty good starter. And so who cares that I'm now starting to form this image? Well, actually, it's quite important because when we share this stuff with each other and we start to build up this image of each other, actually, we're starting to kind of bring the relationship together a little bit. That's important because by building that relationship, we build understanding and ultimately we start to build trust. And as we all know, trust is critical to having great conversations. And it's that element of trust that really starts to build momentum in conversations. It means we can get things done. It means we can start to create some value. And it doesn't matter, even if how you spend your weekend and I spend my weekend are completely different. It doesn't matter. We're sharing something about ourselves that's of interest to the other person. And I guess the final thing I'll talk about is this thing about being a bit different. So this final aspect about difference is one of the things we're kind of all as humans hardwired to do is to look for connections with the other person. And quite often we do that through small talk. And if you think about some of the small talk we have with other people, quite often it's about kind of, well, where do you live? Where did you grow up? Maybe we went to the same school together. Maybe we know some of the same people. And it's that connection that's quite interesting. You're a bit like us. And that
So that's super useful then, Graham. So we've got three things there that you've just shared with us. So one is that we can use small talk because it enables us to like test the water with other people, helps us to understand kind of the mood and the energy, I guess, before we have a deeper conversation with them about whatever that is, about whatever engagement is we're going to be working with them on. And then the second point was it allows us to share something of ourselves with other people, which helps us to build connections with other people as well. And then the third point is because actually we're really hardwired, really deep in who we are to look for people that are like us so that we can connect with them in a certain way and to deepen that meaning of that connection as well, which I guess then leads us on to kind of thinking about, well, so if we know these things, then how do we go even deeper on this? Like, what are some of the skills and techniques that we can use to help us to actually have small talk with people as well? Yeah.
perfect. So I think we've between us we've kind of established that this small talk thing is really important for conversations. But there's a big gap between knowing that and being able to do it. So I guess the question for you, Kathryn, is how would someone go about actually doing small talk really well?
Yeah, and it's really challenging, Graham, because I think what happens is often we get in the way of our own ability to have small talk. Our internal dialogue starts really spinning on like, what do we ask? What to say next? What will they think of me? Like all this sort of stuff starts entering into our head when we start having small talk, especially if it's with people we've never met before. Or even if it's with people who we've met before and maybe our adrenaline's going a little bit because we know it's an important meeting or something like that. All these things just get in the way. So a little thing that I tend to do that I find really helps is just to reframe the art of making small talk is actually about the other person. It's got nothing to do with me. It's all about them. And it's about me getting curious and finding out a bit more about them and working to build that connection that you just talked about, Graham, and that bit about finding things that we've got in common. Why are they like me? What have we got that's sitting there as a commonality? And that when I reframe that, for me, it's all about putting them at ease rather than my ability to ask like these game-changing questions. So shall I share some tips?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, all right. So one of the ways that we do this at the Conversation Lab is we get people thinking about a small talk framework that we call Spark. And that's an acronym. So I'm going to run through each of those stages. And Graham, interject as I kind of finish out each one and share anything else that you think would be really useful to share with people as well. So the S is about starting with the situation. Think about that as being the context that you're in. So this is about how you ground the conversation in this, like, in taking into account the shared setting or the situation. And it's about setting a really clear tone for that. And you can begin with something that's kind of really relevant to where you are now. So, for example, it could be if you're at an event, you might turn around and say, like, this is such a great turnout. Have you been to one of these before? That starts the conversation. And you're making a comment about the situation that you both find yourselves in. You and I were just talking then about calls that we've both had this morning with people around, actually, it's quite a dismal day here in the UK. And both of us had started conversations this morning with conversations about the weather. Very British thing, maybe, to start with talking about the weather, but that was something that we both found really useful. We were starting with the situation. We were starting with the context that we were in. That was quite a dismal weather day.
Just on that point, though, Kathryn, there's something else that comes to my mind, which is I've done this. That starting the conversation with something is super powerful, and quite often you find that the other person's quite relieved that you've said something. You ever been in those conversations or those situations where there's a few of you in a room and there's not much being said, and the first person who says, "Oh, great weather," or "What a fantastic venue," or "Isn't it exciting to be here?" Then everyone comes in. You've kind of given everyone permission to join in.
Yeah, and it relaxes things, doesn't it? Like, I think you can feel a noticeable shift in the atmosphere in the room, which I think it just starts a good foundation for how you want the rest of the meeting or the rest of the engagement to go. And you don't have to do that like just when you're actually in front of somebody. You can do that in a virtual setting as well. Both you and I are referencing meetings that we'd have virtually this morning. Okay, so then the P is around personalizing the approach. So remember, Graham's just talked a bit about like how we connect with people and finding that commonality and listening to some of the things that people share. So this is around when we think about the P in the personalizing approach, it's around tailoring your questions or comments to the person that you're with. And that's to make the conversation feel really meaningful. So as an example, it could be if you're meeting somebody again, you might turn around and say, oh, like last time we spoke, you mentioned that you were going to be going to do a certain challenge, a certain fitness challenge. How's that been coming along? Or if you don't know them, but you've got some context. So as a really good example, if you think about when we're at these networking, when we're at events and maybe we're at some kind of like seminar or something, pretty much everyone's got a name badge around their neck and it says what company you're on. So you might turn around and say, oh, I noticed you're with X company, right? So how are you finding this particular industry trend or topic that's coming up for your particular industry? So there's always little clues that you can use to kind of personalize the approach with people. Okay, the next one is the A, which is around adding value to the interaction. And that's around offering something really thoughtful, like an observation or an insight or an engaging topic that could enrich the dialogue that you're about to get into. So as an example, if you're, you might turn around and say, like, I noticed your team recently achieved a particular award. So you mentioned that on LinkedIn. That's such a great accomplishment. So what's the biggest takeaway so far from that? Or you might turn around if you're at an event saying that I've noticed there's lots of people here and they're discussing X trend or X topic. Like, how's that playing out in your work or in your business? So you can see that by pulling out some topics or trends is a way of you being able to add value to the conversation. And then particularly when you ask somebody to share with you about actually how it's impacting them and how it's impacting their organization.
Yeah, I love that. And of course, the beauty of that is you can ask any question. You don't need to know the answer, and you're just genuinely curious about what the other person thinks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great way to start, I think.
And actually, I think there's something almost a bit more authentic about the way you ask the question when you don't know the answer. Because then you're purely in learn mode. Then you're purely going to be wanting to listen to that person rather than thinking, oh, this is a great opportunity for them to be able to, for me to be able to showboat how great I am or how much knowledge I've got around something.
And
Okay.
you know, one of the things about questions like that, they're quite disarming, especially if you start it with, "Hey, I don't know anything about this industry, but what do you think about this?" Or "I keep seeing this acronym being used. What does that mean?" That's a
Yeah,
really nice way to start a conversation, I think.
really is. Okay, then our R is finding relatable topics. So that's using like light subjects to connect naturally with the other person to really put them at ease. So there's obvious things maybe to stay away from, like things like politics and things like that, because they can be very divisive. So do pick like light subjects. So for example, if you're sat in waiting for a meeting to start, maybe and you're online, you might turn around and say, has anyone got any fun plans for the weekend? Like maybe I'm debating between having a quiet one or something really more active. What's everyone else up to? And then maybe if you're at an event, it could be like, wow, like events like this make me realize how small our industry really is. Do you keep bumping into familiar faces? Someone might turn around and say, no, I don't actually, I don't know anybody. And actually that's great because you can turn around and go, well, actually, I've met a few people. Can I connect you with a few people? Or vice versa, they can connect you with some people as well. So it's a really good way of kind of putting people at ease or even putting yourself at ease as well. So the K is around keep it light and engaging. So this is about how you maintain a warm and conversational tone to create a really positive and enjoyable experience for people. So as an example, you might turn around and say something like, I always enjoy these opportunities to hear different perspectives. So what are you hoping to get out of today's discussion? Or maybe at an event, you might turn around and say, I always find these events are a great chance to learn something new. So what's been the most interesting conversation you've had so far today? And that's our K for keep. That's our K. Keep it light and keep it engaging.
I love that. It strikes me, Kathryn, listening to you talk through the Spark model. What you're really describing is kind of like a playbook for small talk, and I love that. It's really interesting when we run the programs that we do with our clients. There's a quite a sizable group of people for whom small talk just isn't natural, and you know, everyone tends to think that we should all be good at this stuff, and actually, it is a bit of an art sometimes, small talk. And I think it's quite helpful to have this kind of step by step way of just giving you confidence before you walk in the room to think, well, it's okay. I've got a tool here I can use. If I want to start a discussion with someone or to kind of ease my way into a conversation, I've got some tips here that I can use really quickly using the Spark model. I really like that.
Yeah, and like anything, when we're learning, we're trying something new, it's going to feel a bit clunky. And I think that's okay. Just accept it's going to feel a bit clunky and a bit odd first off.
I think the other thing I'd say about any of these models that we use really is in the vast majority of cases, once you start using it, it's amazing where the conversation goes. So you might go into it thinking, well, I've got the SPARK model, I can do the SPARK. You might just do the start bit. You might just start with some kind of statement, saying something to the other person, and that conversation is going to take off. Who knows where it's going to go? And it doesn't matter really, because this is just small talk. This is just about finding our way with someone.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I wonder if now, Graham, we can maybe move on. And I think there's some watch outs when it comes to small talk as well. And I wonder if I can just kind of share with you a couple of watch outs I think we just need to be mindful of as well. So I'll share my view about what some of these things are. It'd be really interesting to hear what you think as well, Graham.
Yep.
So, all right, so first up is what I like to call BS listening. Don't worry, Graham, I'm not swearing, I promise, but often we all fall into the trap of BS listening. And it's probably not what you think it is, by the way. It's a concept I was listening to on a podcast actually just recently by somebody called Debbie Irving, and it's a concept that she uses. And it's where we ask a question, and then when we start answering the other person, we share a similar experience that we've had. So we go into storytelling mode about ourselves. But the problem is with that is that the other person doesn't always feel like they're listened to because we've moved on and we're telling our story. So the BS listening stands for listening before self. And it's about thinking about actually how we hold back a little bit so that we don't dominate the conversation with our story.
Yeah, okay. All right, I get that. But now I'm thinking there's a bit of a conflict in two things we've spoken about, because on one hand, we're saying small talk, listening to the other person, like properly listening to them is really important. And I agree with that. But I think you'd also agree that the point I made earlier about sharing a bit about yourself. So we do want to share some stories about ourselves, because that helps put the other person at ease and helps them understand about us. So where's the sweet spot between listening attentively and sharing stuff about ourselves? How do we know how to navigate that?
I think there's a couple of things. I think one is when I've just raised that hopefully into your awareness, some people will generally know, hand on heart, that there tend to be someone who asks a question and then very quickly dive in with a story. There's going to be some people who will put their hands up saying, that's probably me. There's going to be other people who don't do it enough, right? There's going to be other people who don't use stories or tell a little bit about themselves. So I think it's going to vary a little bit towards the context and towards you as an individual. But it's being mindful around not dominating conversations with your story and making sure you're giving space to actually really listen to somebody else, because you never know what you're going to find out. You never know what someone's going to share. We're all storytellers. We all want to share our story and we want to be given the space to be able to have that opportunity as well. So if you think that you're somebody who tends to fall into the trap of like jumping into quickly sharing a story about yourself, then set yourself a challenge. And that challenge could be, for example, you're not allowed to share a story about yourself until you've asked 3 questions to the other person. And that should slow you down and should enable you to listen fully and attentively to somebody and give them that space. Okay. So the next one, and this is just to be really careful with humor. We're not saying to devoid all conversations of humor because, well, that might make us feel a bit AI, maybe. We've been AI'd. We absolutely can use humor, but we've just got to be really careful that we're mindful that humor can be really subjective. What Graham finds funny, what I find funny are 2 different things, even though we know each other really well and we work closely together. And then it's also kind of watching out about, it can make people very uncomfortable sometimes as well when you're using self-deprecating humor really excessively. That can make other people feel really uncomfortable. And just watch out for sarcasm, having conversations across cultures. What works for English culture would be very different from maybe somewhere in Eastern Europe or maybe in the States or Canada. There's going to be variations. So just be really mindful about your humor. Keep it light, keep it friendly, keep it professional, and just use it appropriately. Right. So the third one is around, sometimes we get stuck for what questions we can ask. So we just wanted to share with you a quick tip about a quick question framework that you can kind of keep that could be really useful. And that is just simply starting something with, tell me more. So tell me more about what brought you here today. Tell me more about your holiday. Tell me more about how your project is going at work. It's a really nice way to frame up the start of a conversation. And if you can frame up your question really well like that, people are going to start thinking you're one of the best conversationists of all time, because you've given them an opportunity to be able to talk, and you've shown that you're naturally curious about something that you want to learn about them. Okay, and the final one is know how to exit. Not sometimes, particularly if we're at networking events, sometimes you just know the conversation's not working and you need to move on. Sometimes we are having small talk with people because we're waiting for other people to join into a meeting and it's just feeling like it's not flowing particularly well. This happens. And it might be for things that are completely out of your control. It's what someone else has maybe had extenuating circumstances that could be affecting them before they've come into that meeting, right, that you just don't know about. So there's particular techniques that you can do to exit with politeness, and you can have like a smooth transition to kind of as your get out almost. So for example, if you're in a meeting, you can turn around and say, like, it's been really great catching up whilst we waited, but it looks like we're good to go. Really nice way of just being able to like step out of the conversation. Or if you're in a casual conversation with somebody, it could be that it's been lovely chatting to you, but I better go off and grab a coffee before we start the meeting. I need to quickly go and follow up with something. I need to quickly make a call. And particularly if you're at a networking situation, you can end that with, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. Quick, swap your QR codes, and then you can go off on your way. And you can always close it with a whole amount of positivity with, I really enjoyed this chat. Have a great rest of your day. Really nice way to be able to exit out of small talk conversations if it's feeling a little bit uncomfortable, something's not quite working right.
Love it. Kathryn, just listening to all of this, I don't think we ever intended this when we started, but I think what we've almost built here is like a bit of a playbook for small talk. The how do you do it and why do you do it playbook. And there's a few things that occur to me. I guess the most striking thing is, we spend a lot of our time working with customers, helping them get better conversations, build momentum and those things. And there are some aspects of conversation where actually you do need to be pretty good at it. You do need a level of skill to make it really work. The small talk thing, though, I think is a bit different. My take on small talk would be just having a go makes a massive difference. So it might be that it isn't natural, and it might be that you think, well, you're never going to become like a master of small talk like some people are. But just trying it, just using that SPARK model will have a really big impact really quickly.
Yeah, I think it's just a case of like getting on and having a go and enjoy it. I think that's the other thing. You don't have to overthink it. Enjoy the process of doing it as well.
Yeah, and it's like a lot of these things, isn't it? It's that just go, and if it's not now, then when will you do it? So just do it in the next conversation because you've got nothing to lose.
Yeah. Let us know how you get on.